I wonder, how many people have you and I seen today? Wherever the day has taken us from the time we got up this morning until the time we come to Mass this evening. How many people have we seen? How many people did we really see? Did the clerk in the grocery store or at the drugstore pay any attention to you? Did you pay any attention to him or to her? Wherever else the day may have taken us, did we really see somebody? We're so often blind, and not just a physical ailment, but sometimes we are blind to the people around us. And we see them, but we don't see them. We sometimes are so occupied, and often understandably so, with concerns in our own mind, something we're thinking about, trouble at home. Maybe we're looking for a job. Maybe we have someone very dear to us who is ill and suffering in the hospital. And we're preoccupied with our own vision. And sometimes we don't see people. The scriptures are very blunt this evening. I think some of the harshest ones we have. Our friend Amos, he was very happy being the dresser of sycamore trees. But God called him to prophesy on the behalf of God to the people of Israel. And Amos's prophesying took place somewhere between the year 560 and 550 BC. And what did he say to them? Woe to you who are very complacent with how you're living. You recline on lovely couches. I made Father Joe really nervous at home the other night when we were talking about these scriptures. I said, I think I'm going to have somebody carry me in on a couch. And he looked at me and he said, you really wouldn't do that, would you? And I said, maybe. Of course I wouldn't. But think of the image. Somebody brought in on a couch. Look how grand I am. And you're eating very well, and you're drinking great wine out of bowls. And there's nothing wrong with good food and good wine. But the prophet is criticizing his countrymen because during this particular period, it was one of the strongest times in Israel's history. Militaristically and economically, the country was in great shape. And those who could afford it got very complacent with their attitude toward others. And basically said, we're better than you. We're not worried about you. We don't have any of the concerns that may break your own heart. Look how we're living. We're living fine. We're not worried about those other people. Do you and I ignore people and we choose not to see them because of the color of their skin or the language that they speak or don't speak? I only speak Texan. I can't speak Spanish too well. I know what margarita means. I'm not gifted at languages, and I marvel at people who can. Do we ignore people because they're from another country and they're seeking a better way of life? And we put up barriers that keep them because they belong somewhere else. They belong to God. And so do you and I. But we get very complacent and arrogant. And often those two characteristics lead us to being unjust and unkind to other people. This wonderful story from the Gospel of St. Luke. Wonderful story. The rich man lives evidently pretty well, much like our ancestors did in Israel. And we're told the finest garments, the linen, the color of purple, which was the most magnificent color at the time. And the rich man, I love this, he ate sumptuously every day. I mean, this guy didn't know what peanut butter and jelly sandwiches were. Every day. And then contrastingly, here's poor Lazarus. Now, this is not the same Lazarus that we hear about in the Gospel of John. It's another man with the same name. But the Lazarus, the name means God helped me. And here's the rich man in his house, having a good time, things are fine, eating well, dressing well. And then here's this poor Lazarus on his doorstep that even the dogs would come and lick his sores. Now we have to know a little something about table manners in this era too. When people were reclined at table, they didn't use knives and forks and spoons. They ate with their hands. And then when they were going to cleanse their hands, they didn't use linen napkins. They didn't use Bounty paper towels. They used bread. And they wiped their hands on the bread and it got thrown on the floor, and that's what the dogs were after. We're told that the poor man died and almost immediately shows up in the bosom of Abraham, which was a place of honor. I think it's always been very fascinating what St. Luke gives us in the next sentence. It says, also, the rich man died, but he got buried. We're not told that the poor man got buried. Just a very interesting contrast of the difference in what one might expect. And he's there now in heaven, and the rich man sees him, and this dialogue about, let him even put his finger in some cool water and come down and touch me. It's so hot here. You had the prophets. You had Moses. Did you listen to them? They warned you not to turn your back on God. They warned you, as did Amos, to not be too snobbery or too snobbish and just think, well, we've got it made and I don't care about anybody else. That's the way it is. So tough. Paul writes in his first letter to Timothy, he says, man of God. I'm going to expand it. Let's say people of God. How do you live your life? Do you live it pursuing what is righteous and just and fair? Do we try to live our lives based on devotion? Do we live our lives searching for faith and love? Do we work in our lives for what is basically prayerful and peaceful and patient and generous? I wonder how many people we see but we never see because of our blindness. The great punchline in the gospel really is this. The rich man didn't hurt Lazarus in any physical way. He didn't tell him, get off of my porch, quit coming by and begging for a sandwich. He was really not ugly to the man, verbally or physically. But the great sin here was the sin of omission. He did nothing. Do you and I sometimes do nothing? None of us can solve all the social problems in the world. You and I can't implement every social teaching of the church. But how is it the people we see, do we see anguish on their face and offer a prayer for them? Do we forgive the person in our... How many of you got somebody in your family you don't like? Show me. Come on. They don't like you either. But we have to put up with them, right? So where's our patience with ourselves and other people? Do we deliberately ignore people sometimes because we don't simply want to be bothered? Once again, we can't solve every issue. I'm not saying that. But we see people every day. But is our sin the one of omission and a lack of prayer, concern, a smile given away, an acknowledgement for something somebody tried to do the best he or she could, maybe not to my standard, to yours, but do we see people, or sometimes are we so blind we don't?